It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, doesn't it? It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
There wasn't a first down. Not that much. The officiating, I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today. That spot, the graphic displays the unfair penalties. The one not called on us on that period clearly was being booked for that day. And the previous penalty they called on Delano Hill, the ball is uncatchable and by the receiver. See, I'm bitterly disappointed. Throw a hat, throw a stick, throw your sideline, that's a penalty.
This is the Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network, your authority on all things Ohio State. Here are your hosts, Shannon Sommers and Chip Minnich.
Not Chip, if you have an iota of human feeling.
Buckeye Nation, welcome to another edition of the Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. I'm your host, Shannon Sommers, and I'm joined today again by Chip Minnich. Chip, how are we doing today?
I'm doing very well, Shannon. It's great to be with you.
Great. We're just going to go ahead and get into the meat of everything because we have Iowa. Chip and I will recap the Penn State game, and we're going to do our pick'em segment and stuff.
Second and 9 Buckeyes, the Penn State 15. Snap to Barrett, who looks to pass. Looking left side, looking right, throws middle of the field. Caught by McLaurin in the end zone for the Ohio State touchdown. 15 yards. J.T. Barrett to Terry McLaurin, who beat safety Troy Apke into the end zone. And it's 21-9 Penn State. J.T. Barrett gets the offense assembled at the Penn State 16-yard line. Barrett in a shotgun. Weber on his right-hand hip in the backfield. Barrett gets the snap. Barrett fakes the handoff, looks to throw, fires into the end zone, caught Marcus Baugh! Touchdown, Marcus Baugh, as J.T. Barrett hits him with a strike.
Following audio clips are courtesy of Paul Keels on the Ohio State IMG Network.
Drive on down the field, men of the scarlet and gray. Cheer you as we go. Our honor defend. We will fight to the end for Ohio.
All right, let's do a quick rewind of who do we play Saturday, Chip?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think as I mentioned on Acosta Field with Tony Gerdeman, I think James Franklin knows who he plays for sure. I'll let you go ahead and start off with what you want to talk about as far as the recap of the Penn State game.
Well, I want to talk about some of the challenges Ohio State overcame momentarily, but I want to be among the many across the country who are heaping the well-deserved praise for J.T. Barrett's performance, because when it mattered the most, Barrett was at his best. We were watching the game as a family, and I'm not embarrassed to admit this. My kids will be able to remember this game as an example of the importance of perseverance and determination. I think, besides JT Barrett, some shout outs to some other players. I mean, Sam Hubbard with the epic tackle of
the Hubbard hug.
Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley, Isaiah Prince, who was abused last season, and against Penn State, he had a terrific game at right offensive tackle, and that story and picture that Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr had.
Yeah, don't forget to mention Tom.
I'm not mentioning. I did not forget. Unlike Tony, so.
There we go again. Exactly.
He's tough when the weather is nice or whatever. Since he didn't have a coat. Anyway, Denzel Ward, with the block punt that sparked the comeback. I'll talk about in a minute here about. He should have been credited with an interception, but Marcus Baugh, he caught the game-winning touchdown. He had a big drop in the first half. And personally, when I recall, I think a lot of Ohio State fans recall how Marcus Baugh, he was so close to getting kicked off the team several years ago for, foolish, immature mistakes. It was just tremendous to see the maturation process he's had, at Ohio State. So let me talk about some of the frustrations I had. I think I'm not alone here, listening to your episode of Across the Field. I know you have several, but I cannot emphasize, I'm still angry about it. How angry I was at Urban Meyer for kicking off to Saquon Barkley and putting Ohio State in a hole seconds into the game, because for all the deflection that Ohio State can't put it into the end zone. We can't kick it in the end zone. I'm going to politely say balderdash, because Blake Hobbiel earned his scholarship to Ohio State by booming long field goals at Friday Night Lights back in July of 2015. Even former Buckeye Cam Johnston disputed Urban Meyer's claim the other day that Ohio State didn't have anyone on the roster who can put it into the end zone. So enough with the attempts. They're trying to pin the opponent in the corner. Just kick the ball into the end zone and let the opponent start on the 25. Some other things that were just dreadful, the mental mistakes with the false starts by the offensive line. I know that you and Tony were talking about this on your show on Across the Field. And Tony, I thought, did it. And for those of you who haven't listened to the latest episode of Across the Field, do yourself a favor. You'll discover that not only is Tony tough when the weather is
not all decent, the time. Not all the time. If it's not wet. But he did on that episode. He did a really good job of laying out the rationale of why Ohio State continues to run the screen plays that they over and over. So Tony did an excellent job on that. But on the flip side of that, it's my concern is sooner or later, some team is going to pick that ball off and take it for a pick six touchdown. It's going to happen. So if anything, I think it's building up to the time for Ohio State to not only, not do it as frequently, but to fake the screen, go with the bite on the screen fake and hit a deep pass down the sideline. I think that's something that I'd like to see Ohio State work into the playbook. Why Ohio State didn't run J.K. Dobbins more was perplexing. I'm all for getting Mike Weber into the game, but Dobbins should have run more than he was against Penn State. I know, Shannon, you had a lot of frustration on across the field about a lot of the penalties, especially the negated interception by Damon Webb that led to a Penn State touchdown. I mean, that was outrageous. I'm still waiting for some news from the Big Ten explaining that mistake. I will grudgingly accept the Denzel Ward interception that was ruled a touchdown. It was joint possession. On across the field, I know that you guys spent a lot of time talking about it, but my point being about the penalties, 10 penalties is just way too much. Ohio State needs to clean that up going into the stretch run here in November. I do want to give credit to Penn State. They
Trace McSorley was elusive, especially on third down. Mike Gesicki he wasn't super dominant, but he had several big catches that helped keep Penn State drives alive. I think the game, really what it came down to was kind of what we talked about last week on the show, is Ohio State being superior in the trenches, especially along the defensive line. We talked about, I mentioned Sam Hubbard and, Jalen Holmes, had, a really good game. Nick Bosa, I think on Acosta Field, Tony referenced how Nick Bosa was credited with like 7 quarterback hurries. I mean, the defensive line was the difference in the second half, with Ohio State being able to withstand the early hole that they dug themselves in. That and the fact that JT Barrett had a game for the ages. That was the fact that, he was perfect, in the, 13 for 13, and I believe actually, I think he's hit his last 16 passes. I mean, when the pressure was greatest, JT Barrett was at his best. So I know I've been talking too long, but I just wanted to kind of explain everything that I loved and the things that kind of irked me about the Penn State game.
One of the things I want to touch on that I wasn't able to touch on talking with Tony, and you both hit on the J.K. Dobbins and why he didn't run, they didn't run him as much. I'm in the minority that I'm actually happy that they haven't. This is helping him as far as that freshman wall, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, they're trying to get Mike Weber going, and maybe it's just the injury and he's not getting to where he was last year. But it just, I'm happy as far as they're not putting the whole load on, him. He might be able to handle it, but it's November. You want to be able to have fresh legs in November. You're in a situation now. It's win or go home for the next 4, possibly 5 games. So the next 4, maybe 5, and I say maybe because if they win the next 4, they're going to be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. So I give them 5 games. So you need to have him fresh, available. You have Sparty coming up after this this tough Iowa game that you're going to be playing in Iowa City. You're going to you come home and you play Sparty. Sparty's won, or, in that series since Urban Meyer's been a head coach, whoever's the road team has won these games. That's got to change this year. Then after that, you have a little bit of a break because you have Illinois coming in, but you can't have too much of a break because you always have that trap and how you're talking about, you're worried about it with Iowa after having emotional and everything. And I completely understand. And that's completely valid. And everybody's worried about that. So you can't let your guard down against Iowa or Illinois. And then you have to go into Michigan. And no matter what, even if Michigan was 0-11 going into that game, you cannot count out Michigan. And you need to have a healthy set of legs with the J.K. Dobbins in that backfield. It's my thoughts on, the J.K. Dobbins. As I mentioned on the Acosta Field, we were talking about the pass interference call on, I think it was actually called on Ward, but if anybody, I think it was Arnett that was covering him. Correct. So
Damon Webb.
Yeah.
He was the one who had they called pass interference on him, but
he's the one that intercepted the ball, and they called pass interference on him. And I think Arnett was.
It should have been Arnett.
Now, I was standing there, and I noticed that Arnett was kind of grabbing on the jersey. Now, either they were letting that go or not, whatever. So, if anything, that could have been called legitimately would have been defensive holding. Now, I was standing with Chris Hunt, and he was going nuts because, like I mentioned on there, the backfield judge made the call, and it's supposed to be the sideline judge that's standing right there where everything happens in front of him, and he doesn't throw a flag because he doesn't see anything. So I don't understand what that backfield judge, what he was looking at. I mean, especially with the way Webb came over and intercepted the ball, it was clean. He didn't even, touch the Penn State wide receiver. So that was whatever. The face mask. I'm still flabbergasted because on the very next play of that alleged face mask, the same exact thing happened and there was no flag. So it's one of those ones where, all right, is it good or is it, it's confusing as far as there was no consistency. Now, if Ohio State would have lost that game, it would not have been the officials' fault that we lost the game. Not Michigan. We don't play that kind of game. Ohio State was making a lot of mistakes. And I was laughing around on Twitter on Saturday and said, you know what? Ohio State deserves to be number one because not only did they overcome themselves, they beat the officials and they beat Penn State. So, I mean, the thing about Ohio State and what happened is not only have they been gelling, not only have they been coming together, but it's that adversity. It's that that your brothers have your back. That was a statement game, not for the fans, not for the national media. That was a statement game for the team itself, as far as everybody on that team, the way they came together. That block punt changed everything. Penn State, Ohio State goes down and scores after that punt or a punt block. Kick it off. Penn State moves down the field. It's first and goal. You give up a touchdown right there. What kind of reaction are you going to get from the players on the sideline? They're going to be hanging their heads. They're going to be like, man, this mountain might not be overcome. We might not be able to get over top of this mountain. That defense clamped down from that point on and just only allowed the field goal. And in the next two possessions that Penn State had, it was McSorley running for his life. And like you said, we were talking about, the Hubbard hug. That was just, I didn't think I seen it in person. I thought it happened earlier in the day when I was hearing about it. I seen it, but I didn't see it to where it didn't register. And then when I rewatched the game, I was like, whoa. Just with everything that was going on in my radio and all that, that was my fault. But the place was rocking. The place was awesome. Buckeye Nation, you're great. All I know is that everybody who was not on the JT Barrett bandwagon during the season, I noticed a lot of y'all are jumped back on and you're all saying, hey, he's, JT for Heisman. We'll let it slide this time, but next time you start calling out players and everything and doing the stupid things that you're doing, you're going to get called out. So we have Jesse Scott of Athlon Sports and Black Heart Gold Pants. Is that right?
That is correct.
Awesome. We have Jesse join us. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing good. I agree with you. Clemson should not be ranked where they are, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I'll let Chip go ahead and run off with some questions for the Iowa game.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, so the first question I had is, can you give our listeners an idea about Akron Wadley? Because this is the first time that Ohio State and Iowa have played in a few years. Akron Wadley, I think, is one of the most underrated backs in the Big Ten. Can you kind of give our listeners a quick scouting report or an overview of how talented Akron Wadley is?
Yeah, Akron Wadley is he's your I'd say he's the prototypical back of 2017, where Saquon Barkley was kind of your do everything back. He's a little bit of a throwback to the 90s, those guys that carry, the ball 30 times a game, bigger guy. Wadley's that smaller guy who can run between the tackles. He can receive the ball. He's a walking cliche in that, he can literally score every time he touches it, much like Barkley can, but he's just smaller. He'll line up in the slot at receiver quite a bit. He's very dangerous at doing that. He's gonna create mismatches, even against a team like Ohio State, who has the athletes to kind of play with what Wadley does. He is going to create mismatches because he's going to require your linebackers to kind of follow him out there, and then it's going to require your secondary to kind of switch up with the linebackers before the ball snapped. Otherwise, it's curtains. He's got a quarterback throwing to him in Nathan Stanley, who's very efficient with the football when you're looking at touchdowns versus interceptions, and an offensive line blocking for him that each and every year, one of the best in the country. I'm actually anxious to see that line go up against you guys' defensive front seven. Wadley's a special player. He's a guy, we're going to see him on Sundays. I don't know how much of him. I mean, he's going to play in the NFL. I see him as kind of like his ceiling is probably like an Amir Abdullah in Detroit. I think his floor is like, name any running back on the New England Patriots, which, that's not a bad thing to be. So, he's an NFL guy, and he's a dude that should concern Buckeye fans a little bit, especially with this game being, the timing of it and the location of it and everything. Wadley is definitely a concern for Buckeye Nation.
So it'd be accurate to kind of think of him as the focal point of the offense then, correct? For Iowa?
He is. He should be. Yeah, I should say he should be. But you get the sense sometimes, Brian Ferentz, I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking sometimes. If I had a guy like Wadley, he definitely would be. And I think he is. It just doesn't. Iowa's offense doesn't have that appearance sometimes. Sometimes they, because they are limited in the receiving game, they do have some solid receivers. The two guys they have on the edges, and then they got some tight ends that can catch the ball. And sometimes it seems like, they want to go downfield a little bit, and then, they'll feed the ball to Wadley, and if he's not getting yards, they'll just give up on him too early. It feels like, if I'm Ferentz, I feed him the rock until he makes a play, and cause you've got the defense that can back you up in that respect. So I don't know that I worry about getting into shootouts with a lot of teams, but, he is the focal point of the offense. So ideally you want your best defender. I would put your best defender and just kind of spy on every time. Kind of play him like Michigan played Barkley. Play him like you guys ended up playing Barkley a little bit, where you got to hit him on every play. You got to have somebody there. Don't bite any fakes. Just tackle him on every play, and that's the best way to shut down Wadley, and probably the best way to shut down the Iowa offense.
So Nick Easley is Iowa's leading wide receiver with 36 receptions. So I mean, just kind of piggybacking off the idea of Wadley being, if not the focal point, a substantial part of the Iowa offense, I think it'd be fair to say that Nick Easley is right up there then. So can you give our listeners a scouting report for the type of receiver that Easley is?
Yeah, I can. Not only Easley, but Matt Vandenberg is the other guy on the other side of the field. Both those guys, they are smaller receivers, but they're very strong. They're stronger than their size would indicate. They can fight for the ball. They're both really good route runners, both really good hands. They're never going to be out of position. They're not going to burn anybody deep. It's just not what they do. But they are going to find openings in your defense. If you're playing zone, those two guys are going to get open. Easley's a guy who he came from Iowa Western Junior College. And ironically enough, his mom is employed by the University of Iowa, and the Hawkeyes still missed on him and let him get away to JUCO. So they finally did. He's an Iowa kid. They finally did get him. They're happy they got him. He's been a great player. He never should have went the junior college route. He should have been playing D1 football the whole time. He's a lot like I'll go to New England again. Both these receivers, they're that prototypical. They can do one thing well, and they're going to do that one thing well, and you just kind of got to deal with it. They're not the athletes that you guys have in the secondary. So the Buckeyes are going to have the advantage on the athleticism side, but in terms of football IQ, route running, hands, if the ball hits these guys, they're going to catch it.
So let's look on the other side of the ball, and a real feel good story for Iowa. Josie Jewell, just reading about him, the fact that he was not heavily recruited at all. He was going to play Division III when the opportunity presented itself at Iowa, and he's turned himself into a Butkus Award semifinalist at inside linebacker. So my question is Jewell a 3-down linebacker, or does he have to come off the field on passing downs for Iowa?
From what I've seen, he's a 3-down linebacker, and I say that because going back to their game against Penn State, I don't know how much, if you guys have rewatched that or not. To me, that was the greatest all year long. That was the greatest one-on-one battle between an elite offensive player and an elite defensive player. Jewell had a couple of tackles on Barkley in the open field. He was able to run with him at times in pass coverage. Jewell's a complete linebacker. He really is. And this is saying a lot about him. The closest comparison I can make to him is Luke Kuechly. Is he as good as Kuechly? Probably not. He doesn't have the top-end speed, but he's similar in that respect. Probably somewhere between a Kuechly and he's side to side, like the guy in the Buccaneers there. I can't think of his name right now, but something like that. Jewell's an NFL guy, one of the best. He's probably the best linebacker that Ohio State will face this season. Out of high school, he didn't get a lot of looks, and he's the classic case of that, sort of Midwestern flyover country. I mean, Ohio State's in the Midwest, but not like, Iowa and Nebraska Midwest. A lot of these guys out here get overlooked, and as a result, they end up, slipping to, Division II sometimes. They go to North Dakota State or whatever. He lucked out. He did get an offer from Iowa. Iowa lucked out, I should say, that nobody else offered him. He was the best player his senior year on offense and defense in the state of Iowa. No reason he shouldn't have gotten other offers, but he didn't, and he's a Hawkeye now, and he's wreaking havoc. And again, he's another guy. So that's two guys. That's a guy on each side of the ball that for sure I was going to have playing on Sundays, and I think he's going to have a nice long career in the NFL.
So the last question I have before I turn it back to Shannon is I've rattled off a few names of players that, like I said, that I'm familiar with and that I've seen highlights of, if not games of. But can you give our listeners a sleeper player or two, it doesn't matter, offense or defense, to keep an eye and ear out for on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I can do that. On defense, he hasn't really lived up to his full potential, but defensive tackle Nate Budgeta, he is his name. It looks like Bavada if you're watching the game, but it's pronounced Budgeta. He is an 8-man football player from the state of Nebraska, a state champion wrestler. Another guy who he didn't get offers. Nebraska didn't offer him, and he ends up he's a 3-year starter now on the defensive line for the Hawkeyes. He's a guy who can win a lot of one-on-one battles with most centers because of his elite wrestling. That's a guy that Ohio State's going to have to account for. On offense, you've got Noah Fant, who is he's that modern-day pass-catching tight end. He's had some drops this year. Most critical drop was in overtime against Northwestern, but Noah Fant's a matchup problem because he's basically a giant wide receiver. He's going to line up in the slot. He can line up wide. He's a big kid, long arms. He's going to win a jump ball in the end zone. Yeah, I mean, if he catches it, if he gets his hand on it first. Fant's a guy that can cause problems. If Iowa does get into the red zone a couple of times, he's a guy that you don't want to lose in the mix. And then let's see, I mentioned Vandenberg on the other side of Easley, and then you got James Butler at running back. He was out for a little bit this year. He hurt his shoulder. He's back, I believe, because he played against Northwestern. He played against Minnesota. Logged 11 carries. He spelled Wadley. He's nowhere near the game breaker that Wadley is. He's actually a transfer from Nevada. So he's an older guy. He's a mature guy. He's a change of pace to what Wadley is. A little bit stronger. So that's a guy that could possibly you might hear his name called a few times Saturday afternoon.
All right. Excuse me. When you sit there and if you look at just basic stats and everything, I mean, I got into it with a bunch of Iowa fans a few weeks back when somebody made a comment about, Major League Baseball. And I says, well, watching Major League Baseball is more exciting than watching the Iowa Hawkeyes offense. They're ranked 103rd in the nation, averaging 5.28 yards per game. what makes their offense explosive in order to actually be worrisome for Ohio State, for the fans?
It's the fact that they're not consistent, but they're consistent in the fact that they do make big plays when they need to be made, whether that's special teams or offense. A lot of it is Wadley, and some of the guys I mentioned, and Easley and Fant, they've got just enough dangerous weapons to where you think you've got it under control. Nobody really blows Iowa out, right? They're in every game, and just when you think you've got it under control, Stanley's going to break free and he's going to find Fant down the field, or somebody's going to lose Wadley over the middle. And Wadley, you mentioned earlier, most underrated back, probably one of the most underrated backs in the country. He catches the ball in the open field. I don't know if there's anybody who can catch him. That's what makes them dangerous. They kind of, like you said, yeah, it is boring. They lull you to sleep, but that's dangerous because they have explosive playmakers. So you can't fall asleep. You got to play a complete game against these guys, and especially at Kinnick, you let them stick around. If you're going into the fourth quarter and you don't have a double-digit lead, like a upper-end double-digit lead, I'd be worried, because then the crowd can feel it, and those game breakers can feel it. So, just stay awake. Lots of smelling salts. That's what I would recommend for the Buckeyes.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up too. Is you mentioned the Penn State game, and Penn State had almost or over 600 yards for that game. But it took that drive in the final minutes or whatever of the fourth quarter in order to put the, game away for Penn State. Is it just a bend and don't break defense for Iowa, or is it just that when the field, shrinks up that they get better?
A little bit of both. I think it's a bend don't break in that Kirk Ferentz, he's an old school guy. He's an NFL guy. He knows the only true stat that matters at the end of the game is the score. And a lot of that gets away from us. You saw, back to the NFL, you saw Belichick roast a reporter the other day for talking about winning sexy. Ferentz is from the Belichick tree. He doesn't care about winning sexy. If they can he doesn't care if they're sticking in it with special teams, no offense, whatever. He's going to keep it close. He's going to keep the game close. And, it's just the way it is, man. It's a tough place to play, and they're a tricky team to play against, because, again, when you get your foot down on the gas, you have to keep it on the gas against these guys. And for whatever reason, people don't seem to do that. And it's not just that the other team's falling asleep. Iowa is talented. They're talented, as we mentioned. They've got Jewell. They've got some other guys on their defense. I'd say they got probably 5 or 6 guys on that defense that are going to play in the NFL. There's talent on that team. They don't have the depth that Ohio State has, but they have the starting talent that most teams have, and they're going to play with anybody. They're not afraid of anybody. They're just like I mentioned Michigan State a couple weeks back. I called Michigan State the garbage can team. You get in a fight with them in a back alley, they're going to pick up a garbage can and hit you over the head with it. Iowa's the same kind of team. They're going to win by any means necessary. So it's going to be a different game than the Buckeyes had against Penn State. Penn State's physical, but they're more finesse than physical. Iowa's just all physical. There's zero finesse there.
It's funny you mentioned Belichick and friends, and I think Saban even at one point in time before the Browns were the laughingstock of the NFL, all 3 of those guys were on the Browns coaching staff together. So,
pretty amazing. Also,
God, I miss those days.
Dimitrov, the GM of the Falcons, Thomas Dimitrov, he was actually a groundskeeper on the Browns during that time, and they would bring him in. His dad was a scout, and they'd bring him inside, and Belichick taught Dimitrov how to evaluate film.
Yeah. Well, you think at one point in time they should be able to find one regime, just one, that'd be able to get stuff right. But I digress on that. Now, we know that Iowa has a talent. Iowa has a good head coach. They're always putting in NFL quality players. What is the problem with Iowa in order to be consistently like a Wisconsin and Ohio State, a Michigan? Well, when Michigan was good back in the early 1900s. But I mean, being that top tier team in the West, instead of it seems, do they just have a problem that when they, the big games they get up for, but when lower opponents come in, it's just like low, just passive aggressive basically? Yeah,
I think Ferentz is a little bit conservative. There are times when that works in Iowa's favor, and there's times when it doesn't. He's not a gambler, and in fact, I mean, people make jokes about that out here. Fourth and 2 inches, time to punt, bring on the punt team, and it doesn't matter where you are in the field. That's part of it. Inconsistency with the offensive coordinator, I think. They changed coordinators quite a bit over the past couple of years. I think that's going to change now with Brian, for better or for worse. There's a little bit of that. I think a lot of it's coaching. A lot of it is recruiting too. As I mentioned, yeah, they do have talent up front, but they just don't have the depth, and a lot of that's their location, and it's the changing landscape of the country and the game itself. Ohio State's down there. You guys are in the Midwest, but you're close. You're right on the border of SEC country. You've got a guy who's coached in the SEC and knows the ins and outs of the SEC. Where it's tough to talk a kid from Florida. Or a lot of kids from Florida into coming up to Iowa City and playing in the cold and in the frigid, in the middle of the country, in the breadbasket. It's tough to do that. Nebraska's going through that right now. Iowa's having better luck than Nebraska because they do have a better head coach. They've got consistency at the head coaching spot. But as far as becoming a Wisconsin, I think that there was a little bit of back and forth between Iowa and Wisconsin. If you look at the past 6-7 years. It has been Wisconsin dominating the division, but Iowa's been right there, right behind them. Iowa's probably been the number 2 team if you look at wins, losses, and all that stuff. I mean, they had the Rose Bowl run a couple of years ago. So I don't think they're far off, but they also know who they are, too. They know that they're okay, and that's the reason that Ferentz has been there so long is the expectations. They know that it's going to be tough to win 11 or 12 games every year. You win 8 or 9 every year at Iowa, and you're going to be okay. You win 8 or 9 every year at Michigan or Ohio State, you're going to get fired. You're going to fire a coach once every 3 years. So expectation level is that as well. So lots there. I mean, we could have a whole podcast based on that, but they're not far off of Wisconsin, and who knows? This is a pretty young team. You got some big names on Iowa, but all in all, I think it's a pretty young team, and they'll be around here in another couple of years. They might have another 10, 11 win team.
You see, J.T. Barrett, Joe Thomas Barrett, as Gus Johnson would say, coming in with the heart of a lion, and what he did to Penn State was it was pretty phenomenal. I mean, you can't really put into words what he did in the fourth quarter, the way he just took it over and 16 for 16, and I think he had 328 yards for the whole game. What are the defensive backs for Iowa besides Amani Hooker, which, Ohio State fans will recognize the last name, but it's not Malik Hooker. But I mean, as far as the secondary, I mean, who are some other players that Ohio State fans should keep an eye on for Iowa? You've got, hang on here. I got to pull up my stat sheet here. They've got some corners. They don't have any big names. I'll be honest with you. They don't have any big names in the secondary, and I'm having a total brain fart here. Because Desmond King the last few years has pretty much been one of the top defensive backs in the conference for them.
Who's that?
Desmond King.
Yeah. I mean, you had Desmond King, who he won the Thorpe Award, and you look at him now, and he's tearing it up in the league. Not tearing it up. He's having a solid rookie season, but they've got one guy in particular, and let me pull up the roster here. Sorry, it's late, but your receivers. While I'm looking, I can just say that your receivers against Iowa's secondary, I wouldn't be too concerned to a man about you guys losing many of those battles. The concern is going to be Iowa's front seven. We hear a lot about Ohio State's front seven. Iowa has a solid front seven. They've got some good defensive linemen. They've obviously got good linebackers. If they can get any kind of pressure on Barrett, that's when it's going to get interesting in the secondary with some of those guys. So, let's see. You got Manny Rugamba, who he started the year. He's having an okay year. He goes back and forth between safety and corner. He doesn't really, let's see. You don't have any picks, but again, he doesn't get thrown out a whole lot either. He's more of a run stopper. He'll come up, stop the run a little bit. Who else we got? Your corner.
Josh Jackson?
Jackson. Yep, that's what I'm thinking. Sorry. Jackson's solid. He's their best corner, easily. He's got a couple of picks this year. He's your prototypical shutdown guy. He's a taller guy. He can take on your bigger receivers and run with them pretty well. But again, your receivers to a man, they're going to get over. If Barrett has any time, he's going to find your guys. If Iowa can't get a pass rush, Barrett's going to have a big game. So that's the biggest key for this game, I think. It's not that secondary matchup. It's your offensive line against the front seven.
Well, speaking of that, did you watch any of the Ohio State-Penn State game?
I did.
Did you notice that J.T. Barrett was only sacked twice?
I didn't. I wasn't counting. I haven't looked, but yeah, I noticed that he it's a combination of having time and he's mobile. He can avoid a lot of stuff. So, but again, I'll tell you this though. I would. Just the front seven, I think Iowa might have a better front seven. They definitely don't have a better secondary than Penn State, but I would put Iowa's front seven right there with Penn State's front seven, maybe a little bit better. So, again, going to be interesting. And the one thing Iowa doesn't do, even when they're rushing the passer, they're not going to over pursue. They don't just come in with their hair on fire. They come in cautious. They keep contained. They keep contained as well as anyone in the country, and so that's going to be key. Barrett can do a lot of damage on the move. I think Iowa's going to approach it as, they'd rather keep him just still in the pocket, and just kind of stay in his face instead of forcing him out of the pocket. Just force him out of the pocket. I think, again, he can do a lot of damage with his feet and he can do a lot of damage on the run throwing the ball. So, yeah, I'd say they want to contain him for sure.
One is a riverboat gambler using his gut to make his picks. The other is cool, calculating, and scares Vegas. This is the Silver Bullets game prediction segment. Who are you going to ride with? All right, so for our pick'em segment, I think I didn't look. Chip, am I still at +4?
That's correct.
Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump into this here. We got we'll start off with number 9, Wisconsin at Indiana. It's at 12 p.m. on ABC. Jesse, you're our guest. We'll let you go ahead and go first.
You want a score or just a pick?
Just a team. We don't not worried about the score, except for the Ohio State Iowa game.
All right, Wisconsin.
Chip.
I agree. I think Wisconsin is going to take it to them.
Yeah, I think I didn't even see who Indiana has for the starting quarterback, if what's his name's back yet or not, but definitely. And if Wisconsin loses, then I guess they can just be quiet about all the crying that they're doing right now. Number 7, Penn State, licking her wounds going into East Lansing to face number 24, Michigan State, 12 p.m. on Fox. Chip?
Tough one, I think. I liked that analogy to the, picking up a trash can when talking about Michigan State. I think Michigan State's going to do enough to frustrate Penn State. I just don't know if they have enough offensively, so I'm going to go with Penn State. But I think it's going to be a close one.
Jesse.
Yeah, I think it'll be close to start, but I think like Chip said, they don't. Michigan State doesn't have the offense to play in the shootout that they're going to have to get into with Penn State to win this game. It'll be close in the first half, but I think Penn State pulls away and wins it by double digits.
Yeah, I agree. Michigan State has a better defense, and it's going to probably give Penn State some issues, but like you said, they just don't have any kind of offensive firepower in order to be able to hang with them. All right, in the battle of the, I don't even know what you want to call this anymore, Illinois at Purdue. It's at 12 p.m. on BTN. Jesse.
I'm going to have to revert my television to regular definition in order to watch this game. I don't believe it deserves to be broadcast in high def. In the meantime, I'm going to say Purdue wins it by like 10 points because Illinois is just terrible. And Purdue, I was on the Purdue train early in the year, but I think I want to get off this baby.
Yeah,
I'll take Purdue for the win.
You could tell that their depth is lacking seriously, but I mean, Brum just got there, so Chip.
Yeah, Purdue, they're still better, even with high def or low def. They're still better than anything Illinois can throw on the field. So I'm going with Purdue.
I agree. I'm going to go with Purdue also. All right, number 4, Clemson against number 20, North Carolina State. It's at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. Chip?
I think this is going to be a good game because I think North Carolina State, I know they're coming off a shellacking at the hands of Notre Dame, but I think they'll be competitive with Clemson. They were last year. I think Clemson has too much, though, so I'm going to go with Clemson.
Jesse?
I'm going with the upset here. I like Clemson's defensive line to NC State's defensive line to neutralize Clemson's run game and turn this into a shootout between Bryant and what's his name here? I was just writing about him. Finley. Finley and Bryant going at it head-to-head, passing the ball. I think Finley's very efficient with the football. I like his skill players, and it's at home. It's in NC State. I think NC State's going to throw another wrench into the college football playoff.
Well, hopefully, just, based on which we'll get into a little bit later. But, yeah, Clemson's favored by 7.5 points. So I'm going to end up, as much as I don't like it, going with Clemson. All right, the barn burner of the East here. We have Maryland at Rutgers at 3:30 p.m. on BTN. Jesse.
I'm going to take Rutgers. I think if you look at Rutgers' schedule, I wrote about this last week on Black Heart Gold Pants. Rutgers if they can win 3 of their last 4, which one of those last 4 is against Penn State, but if they can beat, let's see, they got Purdue. They got 3 winnable games basically. Yeah, they got this one. They got Purdue. And then they finish the year against Michigan State. They'll be bowl eligible. So I'm going with Rutgers on this one. I think they've got something to play for.
Chip.
I think it's an interesting take. I guess, something. I'm going to go with Rutgers simply because, quite honestly, I think Bortenschlager, offensively, I think Maryland is they're just really struggling. I know that they beat Indiana last week, but I liked Rutgers. They were hanging tough against Michigan for the first part of that game last week. So I'm going to go with Rutgers, not by much, but enough to win.
Yeah, whoever thought that we'd keep saying Bortenschlager's name. Maryland's favored by 2, but that's still considered a toss up. I'm going to go with Rutgers at home also. I was hoping nobody else picked that one.
And I gotta correct myself. I said Maryland, Purdue, and Michigan State. It's actually Maryland, Indiana, and Michigan State that Rutgers has. They can win those 3 games. They'll be bowl eligible.
Yeah, it's because I thought they played Purdue and they won that one. But yeah.
Yeah, they beat Purdue. So yeah.
All right, we got the number 6, Ohio State at Iowa, 3:30 p.m. on ESPN. Chip, I'll go ahead and go with that one and your score.
Well, I think this is going to be a close game into the second half. I know Ohio State's favored, but I'm just very, very uneasy. I think, this is just the kind of game. Ohio State coming off the emotional win against Penn State. I think they have more talent than Iowa, but Iowa, I've seen this movie script before way too many times. 2008 Penn State, last year against Michigan. The higher ranked team coming into Kinnick Stadium and coming out of there with a loss. I think Ohio State's going to do it, but I think it's going to be, like I said, close into the second half, and Ohio State pulls away. So I'll go Ohio State 35, Iowa 17.
Jesse.
I'm going to read you the first couple of sentences from what I'm working on right now, a little thing called Outrageous Predictions I do for Athlon. I'll read you just the first 3 sentences, and then I'm not going to give you a pick of the game. Here we go. I have no stats or science to back this up. No logic. No, this is how it can happen. All I have is a gut feeling and a history of craziness going down in Iowa City. It's going to be cold and rainy. The Hawkeye fans will be responsibly hydrated. The Buckeyes are coming off a physically and emotionally challenging win, and Iowa has nothing to lose. I will withhold my pick for the game.
He's got Iowa, so. Based on the videos
you can read my prediction tomorrow on Athlon Sports.
But based on the videos I've been watching of the players, these guys are already tuned into the Iowa game, and they definitely had the mindset of, all right, next game, let's move on. They're a team, they're a brotherhood, they're gelling, they're playing together, they are on a mission. 31-17 Ohio State. All right. Northwestern at Nebraska, 3:30 p.m. on BTN. Jesse.
I think Northwestern is just a more physical team, and the bigger picture, if you look at what's going on right now in other parts of the country, if Nebraska doesn't win this game, and I don't think they will, you may see a coaching change happen on Monday. A necessary coaching change to make sure that Nebraska has a chance to get the guy that they want.
Chip.
I agree with everything that was just said. I think Northwestern is the more physical team. It's uncanny to comprehend for me is Nebraska cannot run the ball. They literally did not run the ball against Purdue last week. I know that they won, but I never thought I would, as a college football fan, think that Nebraska is unable to run the ball, and as was stated, Northwestern's much more physical. I think Northwestern wins.
Bye, Mike Riley. Number 21, Stanford at number 25, Washington State, 3:30 p.m. on Fox. Chip.
Tough one to call, but I'm going to go with Stanford here. I just think Stanford is kind of getting back into that traditional, physical mold. I know that they didn't look well last week against Oregon State. I'm going to just that they were just kind of not really into it. And I think Stanford they'll round back into shape against Washington State. So I'm going with Stanford.
Jesse.
This is at Washington State, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take the Cougars in this one. I think Mike Leach will have something up his sleeve for Stanford. They're a little bit banged up, and I think Washington State can take advantage and turn this into a type of game that Stanford doesn't want to play.
I am going to go with Stanford also. I think Bryce Love, he's going to, he's trying to get himself not isolated, but cemented into that Heisman talk and everything. And I think I'm having a brain fart as far as, what's your coach's name?
Stanford?
Yeah.
David something.
Yeah.
David McStanford.
There you go. I honestly think that, I'm surprised that his name isn't being floated around a lot more for, that's it.
Yep.
I'm surprised his name isn't being floated around a lot more for a lot of these jobs that are starting to come open. Number 5.
I agree. I actually heard his name mentioned a couple of times. Well, every time Nebraska goes to hire a new coach, his name gets mentioned. And if I was him, I wouldn't come out here.
Number 5, Oklahoma at number 11, Oklahoma State, 4 p.m. on FS1. Jesse, I'll let you go ahead and go first on this one.
I have never wavered from this pick. I've had Oklahoma State. You guys heard me last time I was on. I had Oklahoma State winning the whole thing. They got beat, but I still got faith they're going to win Bedlam, and I think they can still win the Big 12.
Chip?
I'm going with Oklahoma State. I'm not as definitive, but I do think Oklahoma State is better. I think it'll be a shootout. I think it'll be close, but I do think Oklahoma State wins this one.
I think I think Baker Mayfield's going to be running around like the police are chasing him and everything, but I think he's gonna pull it out. And all these Oklahoma fans that I've been going at it with about that Oklahoma being rated above Ohio State or not, it'll just give them a little bit more ammo to come at me. I mean, I kind of miss my TSU fan base that I was building up there. They just went silent on me all of a sudden. Minnesota at Meat Chicken. It's a 7:30 p.m. on Fox, which thank you, Fox, for taking this game as a night game, so Ohio State doesn't have to play a night game in Iowa.
All right.
I'm going with Michigan. I think Minnesota's running out of gas. I think Michigan, not that they're I think let's put things in perspective. They just did beat Rutgers, so it doesn't mean that they're all the way back. But I think Brandon Peters, like we talked last week, Shannon, I think that was the right move to make at the right time. Redshirt freshman quarterback who's the future. I think that they're trying to get back into the kind of mold of the type of team that Jim Harbaugh wants to have, which is being able to run the ball. I think Michigan will win this one comfortably.
I'm just happy that Harbaugh listens to our show and takes our advice. Jesse?
Yeah, I agree with everything Chip just said. I think Peters makes all the difference for this Michigan team. He makes them a much more dangerous team, definitely a more complete team. They win this one by quite a bit. And I'm just telling you guys, I wouldn't feel real comfortable watching these Wolverines in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes out.
Never feel comfortable with going into the Wolverine game. I don't care if you're undefeated, if you never feel. I'm a child of the 90s. I witnessed firsthand, and Chip has witnessed firsthand, some top teams go in there and just get beat down. So never take that team lightly. That's why it's called a rivalry.
Remember what I said last time I was on. This Michigan team, they lost all these players. You guys lost a lot too. But it seems like Michigan lost a little bit more, and they're a young team who, as the season progresses, they get better and better, and now they got that quarterback, so look out.
My only thing is if they have any injuries, they're done for just because they just don't have that depth yet.
Right.
Number 13, Virginia Tech at number 10, Miami, 8 p.m. on ABC. Chip.
I'm going with Virginia Tech. I think Justin Fuente is. I mean, I know his name is being bandied about for some of these jobs that are coming open, but I think he's probably one of the most underrated up and coming coaches. I think he's doing a really good job at Virginia Tech. I think Miami. Let's face it. I know that they're undefeated, but some of those wins were kind of miraculous in nature. So I think Virginia Tech does it.
Jesse.
Yeah, I'll take Virginia Tech big in this one for all the reasons Chip just said. Miami's best win is like a 52-30 win over Toledo in a game where no defense was played. Virginia Tech plays defense, and they play it very well. And I don't think this is going to be pretty. I think even on the road, I think the Hokies are going to win big.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we got and I'm still trying to figure this out, how they're even ranked, but we'll discuss that here in a minute. Number 19, LSU at number 2, Alabama. It's 8 p.m. CBS. We'll go ahead and go with Jesse.
I think Alabama wins big in kind of a statement game. I think they're not the type of team that's going to publicly go out and complain that they're number 2. But they noticed it. They noticed when the rankings came out, and they're going to go out there and make a statement, say, you guys made a mistake by putting us number 2. I feel bad for LSU this weekend.
Chip.
I agree with everything that Jesse just said. The only thing that I'm kind of looking forward to is at the conclusion of this is somebody who can try kind of translate whatever Coach O, whatever kind of guttural things that come out of his mouth that it's kind of language, try and understand or decipher what he says, because I think Alabama is going to curb stomp LSU on national television.
Well, you have to give him credit for turning the program around after that defeat to, Troy at home? So, I mean, It's like I said, I still don't understand how they're ranked after taking that loss. But, yeah, I'm going to go with Bama on this one too. All right, our last game here is going to be the West Coast bias. Number 22, Arizona, at number 17, USC. It's 10:45 on ESPN. Chip.
I'm going with Arizona. Rich Rodriguez, whatever,
Michigan, you shouldn't have fired him, Rich Rodriguez.
What's that?
Michigan, you shouldn't have fired him, Rich Rodriguez.
Well, I'm not going to go that far. He was never a good fit. He was the John Cooper of it was just the wrong cultural fit. But he should never have left West Virginia. But anyway, I think Khalil Tate, Rich Rodriguez has to be extremely excited about his good fortune of stumbling into that. I think USC is Sam Darnold is turning the ball over at an alarming rate, and I think Khalil Tate's he's definitely impressing on the West Coast. Unfortunately, no one sees it, but I like Arizona.
Jesse.
I'm a big Khalil Tate fan. I like Arizona as well. I think they win this one by 10 or more.
I'm going to go with Arizona too, because after everything that's gone down with the Browns and Sam Darnold sees that the Browns need a quarterback, so I think he's going to intentionally throw this game so he can be out of the conversation and the possibility of the number one pick. All right, now, in all seriousness, let's talk about some of this rankings. You had an article today out on Athlon Sports, and you're, let's see here. I mean, you hit everything pretty much, I thought, on the head. I mean, when you come in and you say the bad, Clemson doesn't belong in the top four, and I kind of agree with what you said as far as, yeah, okay, their quarterback was hurt, but still it's Clemson against Syracuse. What are some other, like I mentioned LSU. I don't know what your thoughts on that are. I think, me personally looking at it, I think it's also kind of a disgrace looking, as much as I hate to say I want to be on the side of Michigan, but why is Michigan not ranked? They played two ranked teams that they lost to. These other teams, they lost to unranked teams, and they're in it like LSU and stuff. So what are your other thoughts?
Yeah, it's weird that Michigan's not ranked, and then they've got like USC as high as 17. USC got blown out by Notre Dame. Now, granted, Notre Dame's probably one of the best teams in the country, but yeah, USC's a little higher for me. I thought Mississippi State was a little high. I like where they had Iowa State. I thought that was pretty good. They've earned that. I thought Washington was low. Washington stumbled. They stumbled once. And, you can talk about not playing teams or this or that, but this is a good team. If you watch these guys, I mean, you mentioned not being able to see Arizona play. A lot of people don't get to watch Washington play. They lost one game at Arizona State. It was kind of sloppy, but they kind of cruised the rest of their schedule, and they're a little low for my liking. I think they're better than that. One thing that concerns me, and I'm hearing a lot, and I kind of heard you mention something about Wisconsin. You said was whining about stuff. I haven't heard Wisconsin whine, but I will tell you this, and I'll stick to this. I think I mentioned in the article. No, maybe I didn't, but no undefeated Power 5 team should be left out of the college football playoff unless there are 4 other undefeated Power 5 teams. This thing was all started because the Power 5 decided they wanted to separate from the Group of 5. And if you're going to leave out an undefeated Power 5 team, you're already leaving out undefeated Group of 5 teams. But if you're going to leave out an undefeated Wisconsin out of the college football playoff, if they in fact run the table, then you got to ask yourself, why did they even play? Why didn't you walk into their locker room in August, look every player in the eyes, and say, you don't have a shot. You do not have a chance. Don't even go out there. Don't even try it, because nothing you do is going to be as impressive enough for us to let you play for a national title. I said it about Central Florida in my article. I'll say it about any Power 5 team too. So if they run the table, they get left out. The whole system's garbage.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think if they go into the Big Ten championship game, and if it's an Ohio State, that's just going to help them, even just like Ohio State or, facing or beating Wisconsin in 2014 helped Ohio State. The roles can be reversed in this situation. A lot of people are talking about how, there could be 2 SEC teams getting in. If Georgia and Alabama run the tables in their respective divisions, they still have to meet in the SEC championship game. I don't care if a team wins by 1 point or not. That's going to be a loss. The last game of the season, that's one of those teams are going to take that hit. That's the way it always goes. And you can't tell me that just looking at this, and it's, to me, we're Big Ten fans and everything, but it's got that SEC bias that drives you absolutely nuts, that the SEC is not this strong, that everybody keeps trying to prop it up, that they're this good. I don't understand why you have a team like LSU with 2 losses in there. You have, I don't even, off the top of my head, what 2 teams Mississippi State's lost to. So, just to not have a Michigan in there, it's kind of like a slap in the face, because I think that the Big Ten is the better conference between the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yeah, I think top to bottom, you're right. I think the Big Ten is definitely better top to bottom, but I will say, as far as cream of the crop, Georgia and Alabama are pretty solid. And if they both run the table and they play in the SEC title game, boy, I don't know. It'd be tough to keep both of them out. So we'll have to see.
Well, and that's a situation. If you have a 1-loss Ohio State or a undefeated Wisconsin, if you have a 1-loss Clemson, or if you have a 1-loss Oklahoma, it's.
I think. Yeah, the scenario you're talking about, say Wisconsin runs the table, and say, and I asked it today in that article. Say the top, forget Clemson. Say Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, they all run the table. Georgia and Alabama play in the title game. Say Georgia wins. Say Georgia wins by a field goal. I think you would have to put Wisconsin in, and then you'd keep the same top 3. I think that's the way you got to go. I think you'd have to keep out, because I don't know. We do want the best teams. Ohio State got in last year without winning their conference. Ohio State got in last year without winning the division.
So, no. They won a division.
You want to? Okay,
no, they did not.
No, they tied. They tied for the division.
Okay.
No, Penn State.
You won last year without playing for the conference title. You
Yes.
got in last year.
Yes.
Right? So, I don't know that you can deny 2 teams this good, and those 2 teams are this good. You can't deny them. You can't deny Notre Dame with that strength of schedule they've got this year. As much as we all like to, pile on and hate Notre Dame, if you got those 3 doing what they're doing, and an undefeated Clemson or undefeated Wisconsin, I think it's got to be those guys. If it's not, if Wisconsin loses, and then you're looking at Ohio State and Oklahoma, man, I don't know, guys. It's going to be tough. I'm rooting for you, but it's going to be tough.
See, my thing with the Oklahoma, and a lot of the fans before the playoffs committee came out with their rankings, all the other polls, they had Oklahoma below Ohio State. Baker Mayfield came out crying about it. And a lot of the Oklahoma fans are like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. You lost to Iowa. All right, Iowa's ranked now. Iowa State. So Iowa State's ranked now, and they're 15th ranked in the playoff committees. But when you lost to them at home, and they were unranked. So you can't sit there and tell me, all right, well, Ohio State deserves to be behind Oklahoma. Well, then technically Iowa State deserves to be above Oklahoma if that's the game you want to play, because Ohio State went and beat Penn State. Oklahoma hasn't played another team in the top 5 yet. So that has to count for something, and hopefully later on it will. But my biggest question is, you mentioned Notre Dame and their strength of schedule, and I agree, because they do, as far as an independent, they have one of the strongest, schedules. Will it hurt them not having that extra game for the championship?
I don't think not this year. It won't, just because I think that everybody else. It's going to give everybody else a chance to lose. I have a hard time. Seeing. Number one, it's Notre Dame, and remember, at the end of the day, what we're doing here is you're putting matchups. They want to put matchups, they want to get eyeballs. And if there's any reason, if there's any way you can stick Notre Dame into this top 4, it's going to happen. I mean, it's Notre Dame. We can say they're not relevant anymore, but it's still Notre Dame. They're a national brand. If they run the table, they're in. I don't see any way they're not in. It's just that's the way the season's unfolding right now.
Chip, you got anything else you want to add to the playoff talk?
Yeah, there's a long way to go. I'm not trying to minimize the concerns, but the reality is, let's take a deep breath and realize, we were just on given them a lot of trouble in the past. They have to go out to Stanford, so I can see legitimate, those are 2 games that could pretty much end any and all discussion about Notre Dame. We're talking about Oklahoma playing Oklahoma State this weekend. That could eliminate them. I think, by and large, when it comes to, Georgia, I think I may be mistaken, but I believe that they still have to play Auburn. As Auburn, they play Alabama at the end of November, the same day Ohio State goes to Ann Arbor. A lot of stuff can happen, and in my opinion, I think what I see realistically happening, quite honestly, like I said, I think that Georgia, if they run the tape, I think that Georgia's a good team, but I think the possibility of Georgia getting just completely taken to town by Alabama. I know Georgia's got a freshman quarterback. I could see Nick Saban, being able to dismantle Georgia, and kind of on national television, kind of ending any and all talk of Georgia being a second team in the conference, or in the playoff. And, I think Notre Dame trips up, right there, it's like that lends itself like two of the teams out, that moves Ohio State up. And, to Jesse's point, I would not rule out the fact, Ohio State running the table and getting tripped up by Wisconsin, and Wisconsin sliding in. So, like I said, it's, that's what makes it all enjoyable. That's what, the fact that we've got 4 weeks left, a slate of games this weekend, think about some of the games that we were predicting this whole conversation, we could be looking back on it like, I can't believe we were concerned about, just let it all, the time that I'm going to be concerned is probably on a Sunday afternoon that, like early December when, depending on how and where Ohio State finish their season, kind of getting that bowl game destination, unveiled that December afternoon, that Sunday afternoon.
All right, I'm going to do the closing, but after the closing, we're going to do the review after we get off with Jesse. All right, Chip.
Sure.
All right, Buckeye Nation. That's going to do it for this episode of the Scarlet. Look at that. I almost did the old one. All right, Buckeye Nation. That's going to do it for this edition of Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. Jesse, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out and joining us and having a lot of fun college football talk. Besides the Athlon Sports and Black Heart Gold Pants, where can people find you?
Well, always on Twitter at the JP Scott. And if there's any Oakland Raider fans out that way, you can follow some of my stuff on Just Blog Baby. Doing a little bit of work for them right now. It's an Oakland Raiders blog on the Fansided Network, so check that out too.
Chip, where can I find you at?
Well, like Jesse, I can be found contributing for Athlon Sports and also obviously at Hayes and Cannon on the ozone.net. And I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich, Minnich.
You can follow me on Twitter at Shannon, CFB. You can also, don't forget, you can listen to Across the Field with Tony Gerdeman, show I produce with Tony. Keep an eye out. We're going to have some videos starting to roll out on Silver Bullet's YouTube channel. Got a new computer and Got a bunch of new toys I'm going to be playing with. Got some videos from the band and the team and everybody entering in the different games. We're giving away a set of rally towels. I was able to get some rally towels from the stadium from the Penn State game. It's going to be one scarlet, one gray. If we get 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel, we're going to give away a set, and whoever helps us to get the most subscribers on our YouTube channel will get another set. So get the word out, help build us up, get our YouTube channel going, and we're going to be having some fun with that. Don't forget, you can listen to our show on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube. You know, if we're somewhere that you guys want us to be, just let us know and we'll get the show put up there. All right, for Chip Minnich, I'm Shannon Sommers, and thanks again to Jesse Scott. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.